And good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to another episode of Think and Grow Rich Masterclass with my co hosts and a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful show we have prepared for you today. And my name, of course, is Ann McNeil, and I am the Master Wealth Builder, helping you to build a wealthier business and life. And we're excited today to bring to you the principle from the book Think and Grow Rich entitled Faith. What is faith? It is said that faith is a state of mind that can be induced by repetition, which is also called autosuggestion. The author tells us that faith in yourself and faith in the infinite before we begin is the beginning of all success. And as I was preparing for this episode today, I started thinking about how do I use faith? My mom was a holiness minister and she taught me a lot about the principles of the Bible. But it really was not until I picked up a copy of Think and Grow Rich and began to better understand the application of the principles. Faith is one of those. I've always heard that faith comes by hearing and hearing and hearing the word. So automatically, I only assumed it was talking about the word of God. But as I began to live these principles, starting with desire for what I wanted in my life, I then began to realize that if I took my desire and applied the faith moment by moment, day by day, the application of that faith with my belief that it was possible, mixed with this formula, which we're going to discuss later on in the episode, would then begin to give me the self-confidence and belief that I could achieve my desires. So I want to bring on my co-hosts and let's introduce them. And we're going to begin to talk about this chapter, this principle called faith. Napoleon Hill tells us that faith is the starting point of all accumulation of riches. Faith is the basis of miracles. Faith is the faith is the only antidote for failure. So, with that thought in mind, let me welcome Ursula Odom and, of course, the man of the hour. That's because you're not here, Peter. The man of the hour, none other than the Galen Bingham. So, good morning. Ursula, if you go first and introduce yourself, please.
Good morning. I am Ursula Odom, CEO of Sula2, and we make old new in everything that we do. In that, we capture and preserve legacy information in any form possible, from books to legacy walls. And I have to have faith that I have the skills and the team to make it happen. So that's part of what I'll talk about today, too.
Awesome. Galen?
Good morning. My name is Galen Bingham. I'm the leadership strategist and I'm CEO of Kill Global Coaching and Consulting. This is a really, really important chapter and concept because this is where we start going from desire to the actual creation and the materialization of this thing that we desire. This is one of the most important steps because if you don't have faith, it really doesn't matter what you say you want. I'm just really, really excited every time we get to go deeper into this concept and deeper into Think and Grow Rich. And as I said before, this chapter, this concept is really at the cornerstone of how we make things happen. So I'm ready to get into it.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you so very much, Galen and Ursula. And I'd like to share that as a certified coach with the Napoleon Hill Foundation, we, as the International Mastermind Association, we are the place of accountability for groups who desire to be held accountable at another level. And I received a request from the foundation to do some training last year during COVID, since people could not meet in person. And the principle that they asked me to teach on was actually applied faith. And it wasn't until I began to do the research and began to look at the many, many, many different forms and words that people were quoting, and even Napoleon Hill himself, I thought back to something that I began to believe for myself, and I use this as an example, and that is that when I am challenged the most, when I am challenged the most and I cannot see my way during a particular point in my life, being a very successful business owner in the construction industry, I was faced with having having a lot of debt as a result of some money being missing. I'll leave it at that. But I had to get up every day, and I'm talking about close to 7 figures gone. But I had to get up every single day and do the next thing. And I remember the words of Emerson, who said, when you do the thing, you will have the power. And the thing that I found I had to do was just to have faith for the moment, not tomorrow, not even next week, not even next month, but having faith in that moment of destitution, if you will, not having payroll, but having to persist until I succeeded with the spirit of excellence. My faith began to increase as I began to persist moment to moment. And so mixing all of these principles together, which we're going to discuss, we're going to now go to what we call the 13 steps to riches. And these 13 steps to riches are basically the principles that Napoleon Hill has created during his research when Napoleon Hill was asked by Andrew Carnegie if he would take 20 years of his life and research the most successful people during their day. Find out, why are some people very successful? What are the principles? While others are not. Doesn't matter your birth, because what he found was that there were people who were born very, very wealthy in their family, but then ended up destitute. Then there were people like Carnegie and Hill who were born very poor, but died very wealthy. And so at this point, we're going to go ahead and we're going to share with you the 13 principles that Napoleon Hill found created great, not just great, but great, great, great wealth and success for those individuals that would apply those principles. Thank you.
Number 1 is desire. Napoleon Hill said that everything starts with a burning desire, a compelling reason for doing what it is we do. Step 2 is faith, having belief in our ability to attain that which we desire. Step 3 is what we call autosuggestion. Autosuggestion simply means being very intentional about the things that we are pouring into our thoughts, into our brains, and into our consciousness. Our brains, our minds will receive everything automatically, but we have to work extra hard to make sure that the positive things are what we are feeding ourselves, because those positive thoughts are going to turn into positive actions. Step number 4 is specialized knowledge. No one person knows everything, even about whatever their particular area of expertise might be. And the value of the Mastermind principle is using the specialized knowledge of other people. Step number 5 is imagination, the workshop of the mind. Everything starts with our imagination and our thoughts, the burning desire to transform those thoughts into our reality. In order to do that, we have to take a look at step 6, which is organized planning. That is how we crystallize our desire into action, organizing ourselves. Having the thought and not acting on the thought isn't going to get us anywhere. We have the thought, we go through the organized planning to transform that thought into action. Step number 7 is decision. What Napoleon Hill said is the mastery of procrastination. Napoleon Hill said that the antidote to procrastination is simply to make a decision and then move on that decision. Step 8 is persistence. We have to have a sustained effort which is induced by our faith in order to achieve our goals. One of Napoleon Hill's books I love, even the title, 3 Feet from Gold. Those people who became rich during the gold rush in the wild, wild west days didn't do that because they were necessarily smarter or had better information than anyone else. it's because they stayed just a little bit longer. Sometimes people left when they were just literally 3 feet from gold. So hanging in there, being persistent, is step number 8. Step number 9, the power of the mastermind, the driving force. None of us can accomplish anything on our own. Everybody, I don't care who you are, from the most prominent person to the person who might be considered the lowest on the totem pole, everybody has someone who helped them get to where they are. And the power of the mastermind is being able to use those influences around us, use the thoughts, use the knowledge, use the exploration of other people to help us in achieving our goal. Step number 10, the mystery of sex transmutation. This title can be a little confusing, but essentially what the mystery of sex transmutation means is that we oftentimes in our society think of sex as being purely physical. It is absolutely physical, but what Napoleon Hill teaches us is that sex also has an emotional element, and that sex is the strongest of our desires. That if we can take our sexual energy, transform that into positive, creative influences, it can propel us to new heights. And so we spend quite a bit of time talking about the mystery of step 10, which is sex transmutation. Step number 11 is the subconscious mind, which Napoleon Hill tells us is the connecting leap between our human mind and the infinite intelligence, the source of all thought, the source of all creativity. Conscious mind, we spent some time talking about how we use that through the influence of autosuggestion and what we're feeding into our mind. Step number 12, which is the brain, the broadcasting and receiving station of thought. Final step number 13, the sixth sense, the door to the temple of wisdom. This is the final step through which infinite intelligence may and will communicate voluntarily without any effort from or demands by the individual. The principle is the apex of the philosophy. It can be assimilated, understood, and applied only by first mastering the other 12 principles.
All right, all right. Now you have the 13 principles and the 13 steps. But let's start with the first one of desire. And then as we go to this one we're discussing now, which is faith, I'd like to challenge each of you to think about how do you demonstrate faith in your life? And I'd like, if you're watching this live or in the future, can you put it in the chat? Give us an example of how do you demonstrate faith, or how would you like to demonstrate faith if you have not? We're going to start with one of our co-hosts that's going to share her example and her best practice as she has applied this faith principle in her business and or her life. Then we're going to go to Galen. He's going to give an example. Then we're going to start talking about the self-confidence formula and the impact that it has on our subconscious mind as we use the autosuggestion formula, if you will, the repetition of this statement on a daily or a weekly or monthly basis to ensure that our confidence meets our faith. So, Ursula. Ursula, your volume.
Okay, having faith in technology means you have to use it properly. Okay, so when I think in terms of faith, I think of the first self-confidence formula where it talks about I know I have the ability to achieve the object of my desire. And then it goes on, but what that really points back to is my first faith in life. And that was in my grandmother. Yes, I have faith in God, but before God, there was grandmother. and she put words into me that has lasted from that point until now. And things like, you're a blessed child. You can do anything you can put your mind to. Those are the things that she said to me that spoke faith into me as a person, regardless of the situation. Have faith in your ability to go through it. And I'm gonna take liberty right now. My first book was At Sula's Feet. My grandmother's name is Sula. And in there, I wrote something that was really a response to a bad moment in life. And I'll be real. I was in corporate America and I was looking for a mentor. And there is a person that looked like me. He happened to be male. And I went to him looking for coaching, and he thought I was interested in him. That wasn't it. And so I won't tell you the rest of that story because it wasn't pretty. I ended up saying, no, I don't care what he thinks. This is who I am. So I wrote self-motivation. My first and middle names are Ursula Eunice. Ursula means little she bear. I must be the epitome of strength, yet gentle with those who treat me well. I am named for my grandmother, Ursula Smart Stevens. She was Ursa Major and I'm Ursa Minor. She's the Big Dipper, I'm the Little Dipper. Grandmother was the best in her league. I must strive to be the best in mine. My maiden name was Knox, Scottish for one who lives on a hill. I must place myself in a position to see all that approaches to make the best decision at any given moment. Self-preservation means that when all else fail, motivation is best when it comes from within.
Mhm.
And grandmother is what put it within. And then the Bible and Think and Grow Rich are giving me the words to understand what she made happen for me. Because that came out of, I don't care what you think you are and who you think you are. No, this is who I am, regardless of situation, regardless of time. So that's my foundation. Faith is the foundation of who you become and how you overcome.
Thank
So
you.
that's
Thank you. Thank you. You know, Napoleon Hill tells us that faith is guidance. It's guidance, nothing more. It is guidance. And basically, it is guiding you to do the next thing by faith, guidance, guidance. And as we prepare for Galen, I'm just going to read something here where Napoleon Hill says that, if we go back to the starting point of all desire and achievement, it starts with the planting of a seed or an idea. And that's what Ursula is sharing with us her grandmother did way before corporate America, way before the challenges and problems of life could settle in. Her grandmother imparted into her auto-suggestion, if you will, the repetition of some words that happened to have been positive that gave her the strength and the confidence to do what she needed to do, which was to say no.
Yeah.
All right. And so, Galen, we'll hear from you and just share uh, how faith has impacted you as relates to this principle.
Yeah, when when I think of faith, I often think of two things. Actually, there are two quotes that come to mind pretty quickly. The first is Dr. Martin Luther King when he says, "Courage is taking the first step, even when you can't see the entire staircase." And I just relate to that so much because I think even Ursula in her early comments, she talked about taking the first step. Right, just having confidence that the rest of the process, the rest of the staircase is going to appear. The other quote that I think about is a quote that I got from a book that my dad had on his shelf, and I think he's still looking for this book. I think I've probably had it in my bookcase for the past 35 to 40 years, and the quote from that book says that in all of my limitations, I am more than enough for this situation.
Mhm.
And so it's just this belief that I don't quite know how I'm going to get there. I just know that I'm going to get there. And I'm going to follow, the process. And for me, that's at the core of what faith is. And just one quick story. I am a certified executive coach, and usually I work with the most senior executives in organizations, and I do my best coaching in industries that I don't have a lot of ready knowledge about. And so I had a coaching assignment, coaching engagement a couple days ago with the COO, the chief operating officer of a massive hospital system. And she was laying out for me all of the challenges that she was facing and the complexity of the issue that she was wanting me to help her think through. And as she was laying out the details of her situations, I kept thinking inside of me, oh my gosh, I have no idea how to solve that. I can see why you need a coach to help you think through how to solve that issue, because it was her responsibility to provide leadership to thousands of people through this issue that she was describing to me. And in my humanness, even with all of my experience in leadership, I was challenged by trying to think through how we would solve that together. But I had faith that with all of my limitations and all of my limitations, that I was more than enough to help guide her through that conversation. And I just stayed with the process that I've learned. I've stayed with the process that I was trained on in all of my certifications. And I relied on the confidence in my ability to help guide executives through their own thoughts, not my thoughts, but their own thoughts. And by the end of that 45-minute period, she ended up saying, "Oh my God, this was amazing. I know exactly what I need to go do now. You really helped me navigate the noise of my own thoughts, and that's what I needed." And so for me, that's what faith is. Faith is confidence or even visualization in this belief that you have that you will get to the other side, even if you don't necessarily know on the front end how you're going to get there. So that's what continues to pop in my mind as I think about faith. And this is, as I said earlier in this conversation, this is the cornerstone of the Think and Grow Rich process. Because I'm going to tell you, I've been studying this book in detail for the past 3.5 to 4 years, and I don't know how it works. I don't know how it works. I just know that it does, and therefore I'm going to continue to execute the steps, all 13 steps, as laid out by Napoleon Hill.
All right, Galen, you just teed the ball up for the drive. You just teed the ball up for the drive. So let's talk about how does it work. The way it works by faith through autosuggestion, which really is a repetition of words. Napoleon Hill gives us the self-confidence formula. That's how it works. We can call it different things. And like I said, for me, early in my early life, in my years in school and also in business, I heard the words my mom would say, have faith. But I really didn't know how to apply the faith. And it's the same thing that Ursula saying her grandmother instilled some things in her by faith. And Galen is saying the same thing. He knew he had within him the ability to achieve what he desired, which was to have an answer for his client. So now let's talk about the self-confidence formula. Now, Napoleon Hill tells us that there is a formula for success. And that formula for success is directly connected to your self-confidence and your self-image. I tell people often when I picked up this book for the very first time in 1979 at 9 p.m. on December 31st, my self-image was so low, I could literally with the door closed, walk up underneath to the outside. My self-confidence was just that low. But it wasn't until I began to realize that by reading, writing, memorizing and repeating the self-confidence formula every day, that it would increase my self-image and my confidence in my ability. So now let's get to the self-confidence. Now, Galen, I know, a group of us have been through the McNeil Factor Mastermind Clarity Self-Confidence Challenge. We've been writing and memorizing. And so I'm not going to ask you if you got it quite memorized yet. And even though I do, I'm going to read it to make absolutely sure that I don't miss a word. Well, here we go. I'm not going to read. I'm just going to share with you. For those who are listening, we don't want to assume you are clearly understanding what we're talking about and how powerful this portion of the principle is. But Napoleon Hill says that I know that I have the ability to achieve the object of my definite purpose in life. Therefore, I demand of myself persistent, continuous action toward its attainment. And I here and now, right now, promise to render such action. That's the first section. Second section, he says, I realize that the dominating thoughts of my mind will eventually reproduce themselves in outward physical action and gradually transform themselves into outward physical reality. Therefore, I will concentrate my thoughts for 30 minutes daily upon the task of demanding of myself the development of self-confidence. Wow, powerful, powerful, powerful. But then he goes on to say, number 3, the third step is that I know through the principle of auto-suggestion, and that's what we're talking about, by faith, the words. He says, I know that through the principle of auto-suggestion that any desire that I persistently hold in my mind will eventually reproduce itself through some practical means of attaining the object back of it. Therefore, I will devote 10 minutes daily to demanding of myself the development of self-confidence. But then he goes on to say, I have clearly written down, this is the fourth step. I have clearly written down a description of my definite chief aim in my life. And I will never stop trying until I have developed sufficient self-confidence for its attainment. And this is what I want to ask each of you to think about. When we talk about a burning desire, for what? What is it that you're burning your desire for? Or is it just a passive desire? When Napoleon Hill says that unless you have written down your definite chief aim, what is the self-confidence connected to? But I digress. Let me continue. Step number 5. And this one gets me every time that I try something different in my thoughts. He says that I fully realize that no wealth or position can long endure without being built upon truth and justice. Therefore, I will engage, me, Ann McNeil, I will engage in no transaction that does not benefit all whom it affects. I will succeed by attracting to myself the forces I wish to use and the corporation of other people. I will induce others to serve me because of my willingness to serve others. I will eliminate hatred, envy, jealousy, selfishness, and cynicism by developing love for all humanity. Because you see, I know that a negative attitude toward others, parenthesis, no matter how hard I try, because a negative attitude toward others can never bring me success. I will cause others to believe in me because I will believe in them and in myself. And then finally, number 6, he says, I have signed my name to this formula. I am committing it to memory. I am repeating it aloud once a day with full faith, not just a little faith, but with full faith that it will gradually induce my thoughts and my actions so that I will become, and I added the word, a more self-reliant and a more successful person. That is the self-confidence formula. And I would challenge and encourage each and every one of you who are listening to us today. Google the word Napoleon Hill self-confidence formula. Google it, memorize it, repeat it once a day. And one of the things that I started doing over time was actually saying the words with my eyes closed, which has a very different impact than reading the words with my eyes open, or even saying the words with my eyes open. And the point I'm making here is this, and our co-hosts are going to share the impact that this formula is having on them. And I think that that's one of the things that Galen just did. But what I want to encourage us to think about is this. How do you go from having a desire for something and it is here, but your faith is here? Napoleon Hill gives us the confidence and the formula by which to go from here in your confidence to the level of your burning desire, because there is normally a space between the two. But how do you go from one level to the next, to the next, to the next? And I will just say, for my own life, 5 businesses later, this self-confidence formula in every area of my life has been, like Napoleon Hill says, and Galen and Ursula referred to, is the next step, and then just the next step. So Galen, we'll start with you this time, and then we'll go to Ursula, and if you can just share what impact, if any, this self-confidence formula has had, at least in the last, and I think you've been a part of our mastermind group now for the self-confidence challenge for at least 30 days or
26 days. Today is day 27. You know, I'll tell you, for me, this is one of those things that it doesn't seem like it would have power at the beginning, right? Because in the beginning, the direction is just, write this formula. You're going to write these 6 paragraphs, and then you're going to say them aloud, right? And you're going to do this for at least 30 days with the effort and the desire to try to memorize them. And it just doesn't seem like that this would have any kind of power whatsoever. It seems the directions seem kind of rote, kind of routine. But I am finding that this process is doing one of 2 things to me each and every day that I do it. It's either giving me confidence to say, amen, this is absolutely true, this is absolutely working, or ouch, I didn't quite do this particular point. That thing that I was nervous about yesterday is because I didn't approach it with this particular point or that particular point of the self-confidence formula. The thing that I like about this entire process is that Napoleon Hill has broken it down into steps. You don't have to understand the entire process in order to execute the elements of the process. It works better if you understand the whole thing, but you don't have to understand the whole thing. Just follow the process. One of the things that hit me, I've been involved with this platform called Clubhouse, and I've gotten involved with some Napoleon Hill Foundation certified coaches, and we've got this commitment of going through some element of Think and Grow Rich every day on Clubhouse. And I'm part of the group, and so I try to get on every day, and I'm getting on most days, and I'm just speaking from what I've learned so far, and what I've learned from my association with the International Mastermind Association, and everything has been just coming to the forefront. And come to find out, someone heard me speak, and they said, Galen, every time you talk, you bring in Christian principles, you bring in philosophical principles, you connect the dots from so many different places. We want you to speak at our men's conference happening this weekend. And that comes from just how I've been showing up normally. So this thing is affecting me in ways that I wasn't planning to, because I'm going to tell you those Christian principles I was bringing into the conversation accidentally. Now someone is saying we want you to do this on purpose. And again, this is not something I set out to do. It's just something that's starting to permeate how I talk, how I show up, the person that I am. And because, the principle number or the element number 5, that I'm approaching this from the standpoint of truth and justice in everything that I do. That's what's showing up. So that's how it's affecting me. It's really challenging me to be my full self everywhere I go. And that's leading to opportunities that I did not anticipate.
Well, Galen, I'd like to, before Ursula comments, I'd like to challenge that and say, really repeat number 5, where he says, and this is what you're doing: I will succeed by attracting to myself the forces. See, you're attracting infinite intelligence and the forces you wish to use, and the cooperation of other people. I mean, that's what's happening. And so, again, like Galen is telling all of us, we don't have to know how it works. Just trust the process, trust the formula, connect with a power that's higher than yourself, and a vision and a burning desire that will, allow you to connect all of these principles to get your desire. Thank you so much for that, Galen. And I have to say to you publicly, because I've watched this growth in you. And remember that what has been planted in you, going back to what Ursula said about her grandmother, is coming up and out. Okay. All right, Ursula, your thoughts.
Okay, so the whole idea of not understanding how it all works is resonating with me this morning, because when I came to the self-confidence formula, I got so excited about the first couple of ones. I can't promise you, well, I won't tell you that I went through and did all the others, because I was so excited about the first couple of ones, and they had such a major impact on my life so far. To the point where I wrote down the day that I came across it and embraced it, and that was 2/27/2018. And now that I acknowledge that, yes, I have the ability, now I'm going to do the things I need to do and demand of myself those actions, and that they be persistent. Well, I was sitting at an event. I got an opportunity to escort Miss Doris Ross Reddick to an event where her daughter was having her first golf outing as owner of Women of Color Golf, and Rondé Barber was the MC. And as I'm sitting there next to a legend in and of herself, that was an honor. And then I heard Rondé Barber say, "What I like about this is that the line that you're driving your goals down the dreams. I mean, oh no, sorry. You're driving your dreams down the fairway." And I said, no, he didn't just do that. Those are my words, because I wrote the first article about her nonprofit when it was started, and she's now the nonprofit of the year. So that was cool. And then the person who designed the golf courses, and there are only 3 of her in the United States and 10 of her in the world, stood there with my book in her hand and said, "See, this says one person can make a difference." I went, "Oh, snap." So when it was over, I went up to Rondé Barber and made sure he understood. He spoke my words and took a picture. And then I took a picture with the lady, um, Jan. Jan is something in the middle. Jan, I forget her middle name, but anyway, I took a picture with her and made her realize who I was. And then I had this great idea, and I ran back to Rondé Barber and I gave him a copy of African Americans of Tampa. And as I passed him the book and told him that I wrote it, the person next to me chimed in, "Oh, she's being modest. Let me tell you what she does. She's this, she's that, and as far as African American history in this city, and she da 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 da." She took over. So by performing those persistent acts and doing the things I needed to do, and having faith that one day it would pay off. Well, I was pretty happy about that day.
They call it the rest is her story. The rest is Ursula's story. But I'd like to move down the chapter, if you will, and go to a section that related for me a similar confidence, if you will, builder. I was sharing with our co-host earlier that when I read the section of this chapter that talked about the $1 billion dinner speech, and for those of you that may be familiar with the book, Napoleon Hill shares a story about how the United States Steel Corporation was formed. And many of us know and have heard of Charles Schwab. Well, how did Charles Schwab become the financial billionaire, trillionaire organization that it is today? Started with the formation of the United States Steel Corporation. But to go back even further than that, it started with a $1 billion dinner speech that Schwab gave as he was employed by Andrew Carnegie. Carnegie paid Schwab $70,000 a year as a salary, but he gave him a bonus of $1 million a year. Can I say that again? He paid him a salary of $70,000, but he gave him a bonus of $1 million a year. Schwab shared an idea, here we go, with the burning desire and having faith. Schwab shared an idea that he had with a group of men at a dinner. And the reason I wanted to share this is because we're talking about the faith principle. And I'm just sharing the impact of this faith principle on my life. Galen talked about his coaching and his consulting and how he uses faith. And we've talked about the self-confidence formula. And Ursula has shared how you have to do the work consistently and take advantage of every opportunity. Well, I just want to share that this after dinner speech is called a $1 billion dinner speech. And I realized after years and years and years of reading this book and reading this same story over and over and over again, what I did not realize until here recently is that the same plan that was used by Schwab is the same plan that was planted in my mind to create a $1 billion luncheon. A $1 billion luncheon. A $1 billion luncheon. And so, as the founder of the National Association of Black Women in Construction, I realized that many of us in this industry may not have the faith and the self-confidence that is needed to take our business to the next level. I didn't have the faith and the self-confidence that I needed. And so what I started doing was focusing on $1 billion clients, and my business started slowly growing. And every year I would meet with these $1 billion clients every year, once a year, the presidents. And 5, 10, 15 years later, I realized I'd created a process. And then as I began to continue to read this book, I realized that the process actually came from this book, because Napoleon Hill tells us that what Schwab did was he started with a plan. He just used the story of the $1 billion dinner speech. And same thing, and Ursula the same thing, and Galen the same thing. He first started with the desire, then he had a plan. He mixed his plan with his faith, and then he took action on the plan with faith and by faith to do what was necessary to achieve his desire. And his desire was to pull together all of the small steel manufacturers and pull them together and form what we now know as the United States Steel Corporation. But in the formation of that plan, he, of course, became a billionaire. Later, managing money, which we now know as Charles Schwab, but now they call it just Schwab. I want to challenge each of you to think about, what is your burning desire that you can use faith, connecting with the self-confidence formula to achieve your desire? Galen has shared how he uses his faith. Ursula has shared how she uses her faith. I'm sharing how I use my faith in these principles. That's what we're all doing. We're here every single Saturday, sharing with each of you just some principle, just a few nuggets that you can employ in your own life. And so now I've been able to take my business from a struggling one or two person firm to now a firm that employs, I'll just say, a lot more people than that. We'll leave it at that. Okay. And like I said, 5 businesses later. And so what I'd like to do now is have each of our co-hosts share with you how you can reach them. And then we're going to wrap up talking about what you can do next and connecting with all of us. Ursula, if you go first, and then Galen.
Okay, before I do that,
Yes.
there are several people that are joining this conversation, and I'd like to acknowledge them.
Please. Thank you.
Regina, she said, I thought faith is something that you hope for and cannot see. So for me, hope, it's unseen. I focus on things that are good and good for all. And Doretha said, believing in yourself, I will never stop trying until I have developed sufficient self-confidence for its attainment. And then there's someone from Facebook who apologizes for being late, but had a question of, okay, wanting to, okay, has anyone found a difference in the results between changing some of the words versus using Napoleon Hill? And Galen, you've been congratulated. Now, for me, one of the things that popped out as it relates to the story that Anne was sharing is on the last page, page 66. It says, riches begin in the form of thought. The amount is limited only by the person in whose mind the thought is put into action, into motion. Faith removes limitation. Remember, this is when you are ready to bargain with life for whatever it is that you ask as a price for having passed this way. And then further down it says, all great achievers on the wings of faith, which can be created by powerful force known as autosuggestion. So everything begins with a thought, and then faith removes the limitations placed on those thoughts. I thought that was pretty cool. And then my thought is based on the comments that were in the chat this morning, if anybody wanted to address those too.
The last one, could you repeat? I didn't get the question from the last.
The last one had to do with the impact of personalizing the words from Napoleon Hill. And, Miss Ann, I think your story is a great example of that, where you often talk about how you felt like Napoleon Hill was talking to you and you heard him saying your name. So
Right.
what's been the impact of that versus just reading the book for content?
Well, I think the chat, the person who's asking the question or making a statement in the chat is absolutely right. And this is why your own personal affirmations are imperative. And if we go back to chapter 1 on desire, and in the version of the book that we have, and mine is a little tattered, but Napoleon Hill says that on page 28, he asked the question, how much money do you want? Then he says, by what date, and what are you going to do in return for the money? But then he goes on to step number 4 and 5. He asks you to create an affirmation statement. So what I'd like to suggest to the person, most definitely personalize it. It is called your own personal affirmation. The only reason why we're talking about the self-confidence formula, and yes, you can personalize the self-confidence formula to yourself. And I think that that's one of the reasons why he keeps saying, I will, I will, I will, I will, I will. Because now you're saying it personally. This is what I will do. Now you can change that however you choose. The only thing that we would suggest you do, though, is write it every day, if possible, twice a day. Recite it, memorize it. Whatever those words are that work for you, he's just giving us a template, just a template. So I hope that answers the question, but definitely, most definitely, definitely. And the other one, Galen or Ursula, what was the other one?
I think that was really the biggest question that was still in the chat.
Oh, okay. She said, thank you. And any other questions, we'd be glad to take those questions. We're going to just begin to wrap up the show. We want to thank all of our listeners and thank you for following us from one platform to another, because we desire to bring you the very, very, very best as we continue to explore these words by Napoleon Hill. And I just want to go back to Ursula and have her tell you how you can reach her, and then Gail's going to do the same, and then we're going to talk briefly about the International Mastermind Association.
Thanks, Ann, because I get all excited and forget to do that.
It's quite all right.
It's all behind me for those that can see. You can reach me on my website, sulatoo.com, SULATOO.com, and then go to YouTube and search for Sula space TOO, and you will find Wisdom and Young Legend, or even just Google my name and you'll find out some of the other things that I do. I do portray Mary McLeod Bethune, and I bring history to you in so many different forms, and I enjoy every moment of them. So also, if you have an opportunity to share your story, I'd like to interview yourself or some young person that you know in Wisdom and Young Legend.
Thank you, Ursula. Galen?
Yeah, so I want to go back to the question about personalizing the information. And for me, it depends on what you're reading this book for. Are you reading the book for understanding, or are you reading the book for transformation? If you're reading it for understanding, then I'm going to suggest that you read every word as it is written, because that's how you understand. But after you, and you talk about this quite often, that if you read the book enough times, eventually the book starts to read you. And that only happens when you start personalizing it, right? That's when you start seeing transformation in your life. And I think very often about the story in the Bible about Jesus walking on the water and beckoning some of his boys in the boat to do the same, and only Peter had the courage to step out of the boat. And it's one thing to read the story and become enamored by Peter, to become enamored by the carpenter, but it's another thing to realize that before Peter stepped out of the boat, he asked his rabbi if it was in his will for him to step out of the boat. How many times do we step out of the boat on things that we think we're supposed to be doing, but we don't check in with our teacher, we don't check in with our rabbi, we don't check in with our master to say, is this really what you want me to do? Right? So that's how you personalize it. The second thing is that, based upon his understanding and his faith that this is the will that his father had for him, he stepped out and started doing things that in the physical he was not able to do. In the physical, it does not make sense for Peter to do the things that he was doing. He was literally walking on water. Physics will suggest that that's impossible, but he was doing it. How many times are we convinced that because the outside world says that something is impossible, we don't even try, right? He was doing something that the outside world said was impossible. He was actually doing it. And it wasn't until he started looking around at his boys, he started looking around at his situation, he started looking around at what his mind said was possible and impossible, that he was no longer able to do what he was already doing. And how many times does that happen? How many times are we doing something amazing, but because our friends say that's not what you're supposed to be doing, because our mind says, all of my studying, all of my education says I'm not supposed to be able to do this, that all of a sudden we can no longer do the thing that we were just doing. And so for me, this book, and I'm going specifically back to that question, um, I've already read this book for understanding. And I'm going to tell you, even after reading it for understanding, I still don't understand. Now I'm reading it for transformation. I don't know what this is supposed to do for me, but if it did something for Goodyear, if it did something for Firestone, if it did something for Rockefeller, if it did something for Thomas Edison, if it did something for all the people that were listed in the beginning of the book, if it did something for Ann McNeil, I want that thing too. I don't know what it is, but I want that too. I want that power too. And I'm going to leave you with this uh, before I go. There was a lot of conversation again on Clubhouse about the difference between power and influence, and power being perceived as a negative or dirty word. Power is basically the ability to affect change. If you have the ability to affect change, then you have power. And I want the power to affect the kind of change that would allow me to live my life on purpose. Any of us can be successful by accident. Any of us can be successful by accident, but how do you be successful on purpose, consistent with your desire? And that's what this formula allows us to do. And I believe that not only does it start with a desire, but one of the cornerstone elements of this power is faith. My name is Galen Bingham. I'm the leadership strategist and CEO of Kill Global Coaching and Consulting. You can reach me if you want to have a conversation with me. You can reach me by going to Galen at killglobalcoaching.com. But if you just want to hear more, if you agree with my mom thinks I'm brilliant. My mom thinks I'm amazing. And if you want to hear more of that, then one of the more fun ways to connect with me is by subscribing to my podcast, Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership. It's available on every platform. It's available on Amazon, on Audible, iHeartRadio, anywhere you consume podcasts. I double dog dare you to not only subscribe to the podcast, but leave a comment. Let me know what you think about it, because I'm having a lot of fun, and I think a lot of people can tell.
This is
All right.
Ursula. I'd like to add one more thing based on something
Wait,
Galen just mentioned.
Ursula, hold
Yes.
1 second. I have to add this. Preach. Go ahead now. You can. Okay, go ahead,
Well,
Ursula.
I
Go
heard the sermon, all right? What came to mind is years ago when having to take my kids to movies and what have you, I saw Toy Story. And that was all about faith and self because Buzz Lightyear could fly until somebody told him he couldn't. And then he couldn't get off the ground no matter what he tried. And only when he gained faith in himself again that he could find his own true skills and make those things happen. And then the other thing that I thought about is that when I went to the firewalk, I had to have faith that somebody knew what they were doing because those rocks were hot. Once I got out there and realized that they were real, because I didn't believe it until I actually got out there. And I walked the firewalk, did what I was supposed to do, followed instructions. And somebody asked me, would I do it again? I said, because I don't know why it worked the first time. But I knew I had to get through this to get, it wasn't what I was going through, is where I was going to, and I had to get there. And it was a wonderful experience because, that's what it left with me. I don't have to repeat that to know that I have the faith to believe that I can get through these hot times, and that was enough.
Wait, did you hear what she just said? It's not what I was going through. It was what I was going to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is quotable. That is tweetable. If you don't write that down, something's wrong with you.
Well, that's what I took away. Those were my words. I said, I don't know what he was trying to tell me, but that's what I got.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you both. And we also want to thank Catherine Woodhouse for her comments that she just shared, because she's absolutely right. And thank you so much for always following us and all of you that continue to follow us every single week. Again, my name is Ann McNeil, and I am the Master Builder, helping to build stronger and better lives and businesses. And you can subscribe to my YouTube channel at Ann McNeil, like, comment, and share. But also, if you'd like to get a copy of our 6 keys, which this faith is built upon, you can text the word "and" ANN at 55678. Text the word "and" at 55678. I also want to share with you, and as we wrap up, that the International Mastermind Association every year in January, we host an annual meeting for your life. This year, we have um, uh, called this year the Year of the Family. And we want to challenge each of you, connect with your family and talk about this principle of faith. So every week we come on, we want to challenge you and support you to talk about your faith, your family. Next year, we will focus on your health. But right now, the family affair in your health. Our annual meeting is going to be held at the Embassy Suites in Boca Raton, Florida on January 7th and 8th, 2020. And right now, we are building our own mastermind groups. There are millions, literally thousands and millions of groups all around the world that mastermind. But the International Mastermind Association is a place of accountability for your mastermind group. If you're interested in finding out more, you can reach us at internationalmasterminders.com and leave a comment or a question, and we'll get back with you. But what we'd like to do is encourage you, register, join us in January, on January 7th and 8th, for an annual meeting for your life, where you can give you can give your plans, if you will, for every area of your life. And as I wrap up, I'd like to wrap up with this poem, because when you think about faith and everything we've talked about, this particular poem in Napoleon Hill talks about, which many of you've read, and it is called "If you think you're beaten, you're not." I changed that. We talked about personalizing it. I'd like to suggest, if you think you're beaten, you're not beaten. If you decide to use your faith and the self-confidence, just a little mustard seed of faith can help you understand and have the self-confidence, like Emerson said, and Galen talked about a few moments ago about the power. And Emerson said, if you do the thing, and I like to suggest over and over and over again, you'll have the power. If you do the thing, you'll have the power. But you can read this poem for yourself. I'll just recite the words. He says, if you think you're beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you like to win, but you think you can't, it is almost certain you won't. If you think you'll lose, you're lost. For out of the world you find success begins with a fellow's will. Is all in a state of mind. If you think you're outclassed, you are. You've got to think high to rise. You've got to be sure of yourself if you ever expect to win the prize. Life's battles don't always go to the stronger or faster man or woman, if you will, right? But soon or later, the man or woman who wins is the one who thinks you can. My name is Ann McNeil. I am the Master Builder. I'm excited to be here with my co-hosts every single week. Dr. Peter James is not able to join us today, but we wish him well. Galen Bingham and Ursula Odom, we all wish you well. Thank you so very much. And we will see you next Saturday, same platform, same time, 8 a.m. Eastern time, and see you next time. Thank you for joining us.